then you can introduce yourself. We are recording.
Hello, welcome. I'm sorry for the delay. My name is Jana Wu. I'm a clinician at Mountainside Treatment Center located in Canaan, Connecticut. We also have facilities in Wilton, Connecticut, Chappaqua, New York, Ramsey, New Jersey, and Huntington, New York. We're very pleased to be here presenting on stress reduction in the workplace. Hope that you can leave with some strategies. I have been working with Mountainside since 2009. I've also worked with the VA hospital, all in substance abuse treatment. So I look forward to explaining and sharing more of what we're seeing as trends in the community, with our colleagues and in our families, and hopefully some solutions to help people navigate these challenging times. So I'll pass it over to Andrew, if that's okay.
Hello, I'm having a little trouble with turning on my video, but good morning, everyone.
Give it a try now.
Thank you. There we go. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So wanted to start off, we're going to be talking about some, just going over some statistics about the impact of COVID-19 on mental health and addiction. I think, So COVID-19 pandemic has had challenging implications for individual and collective health, emotional and social functioning. Public health emergencies such as COVID-19 may affect health, safety, well-being of both individuals, causing things, for example, like insecurity, confusion, emotional isolations in communities. In addition, the Center for Disease Control notes stress during an infectious disease outbreak can sometimes cause things such as changes in sleep and eating patterns, difficulty sleeping or concentrating, worsening of chronic health problems, worsening of mental health conditions, increase of tobacco and or alcohol and other substances. We have noticed one outcome of coronavirus-related stress is the accelerated use of drugs and alcohols. Reports released throughout the year have highlighted during this pandemic how America's substance use has intensified. Some statistics say that during the pandemic, the alcohol use rose 14% during the shutdowns. The most dramatic increase was in women. Dramatic increase was in women in heavy drinking episodes, which was defined as 4 or more drinks within 2 hours. Women reported a 41% increase in episodes of heavy drinking in the spring of 2020 as compared with 2019. We've also noticed an increase in other mental health disorders, specifically in anxiety. Between February and March of this year, a study showed that there was an increase, a 34% increase in the prescription use for benzodiazepines. Those are medications which are used to treat anxiety, such as Xanax or Valium. So we're seeing those, the impact of those statistics, and we're not really going to get a full idea with all of these studies. There are a few studies that are out there, but full feel for the impact on this, I think, for really, another year or so of how this pandemic has impacted the patterns of substance use in our communities. I'm going to turn it back over to Jana to take over the next segment.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. So, as Andrew said, there have been several significant impacts that we're noticing during this time. And it's been a year of great cognitive dissonance, I think, for a lot of people. It's a very different rhythm and a reality that we had than in past years that we have right now with the global pandemic, and it's changed all of our lives. So what we were hoping to talk about some today is the practice of self-care, because self-care is more important than ever at this time. And we'll review that sort of at the end of our presentation and actually do an experiential exercise together. But first, I thought I'd start with, and I can share these slides, but I somehow can't share my notes at the same time as our slides, but some symptoms of struggle that you might be seeing in your colleagues, your community, and your family, including children. So these are adapted from NAMNE, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And every illness has its own symptoms, but I just wanted to share some common signs of mental struggles or behavioral health struggles that you might be seeing again in your colleagues, your community, your families. So the behaviors you might see exhibited might be seeing someone with excessive worry or fear. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing those. I appreciate it. So excessive worry or fear, feeling or appearing very sad or low energy, problems concentrating and learning, extreme mood swings or changes, including uncontrollable highs, feelings or expressions of euphoria, or uncontrollable lows and deep depressions, prolonged or intense feelings of irritability or anger, avoiding friends and social activities. And this really might be difficult to determine during this time when we're being requested to socially isolate. It might be difficult to know when someone's avoiding or are they socially isolating in protection of their community and themselves. Trouble understanding or relating to people. Changes in sleep habits, such as sleep difficulties, feeling very tired or low energy, even after rest or sleep. Changes in eating habits, such as increased hunger or lack of appetite, difficulties with intimacy, changes in perceiving reality, such as delusions, hallucinations, in which a person experiencing or senses things that are not really existing in objective reality. Overuse or increased use of substances such as alcohol or drugs, and then multiple physical ailments, perhaps without any direct cause, such as a headache, chronic headaches, stomach aches, vague or ongoing aches and pains, thinking that life might be better off if they were not in it, or thoughts about suicide, inability to carry out daily activities or handle daily problems and stress, intense fear of weight gain or concern with one's appearance, increased time on electronic devices or social media, or reading news late into the night. So again, those are symptoms you might be seeing or noticing in yourself, others around you. And in children, I just wanted to highlight those too, that you might be seeing a change in school performance, excessive worry or anxiety in children for example, maybe avoiding or fighting bedtime more than usual, or fighting or avoiding going to school or activities, hyperactive behavior, frequent nightmares, increased disobedience or aggression, excessive temper tantrums, and again, similar to adults, a significant increase in gaming time or on social media, sort of disconnecting from others and reconnecting, more connecting with devices. So before we go on, I want to say if anyone's having any thoughts on these, or if this is resonating, or you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Our hope for this panel, and I apologize for not saying this earlier, but is to have a discussion about this, to have a dynamic, interactive discussion about what you're seeing, your observations, what resonates with you. So if you take a look at these lists and you might, if you feel open to it, maybe sharing in the chat some things you're seeing or some questions you might have about these behaviors. So I also want to note what's very important is that if you are observing these behaviors, don't be afraid to reach out to someone if you know someone that needs help. And the very first step of this is learning more about mental health, which you're all doing right now. So learning more about mental health, observing the signs and symptoms, noting them, and reaching out to someone that you see struggling. So you can also reach out, yourself to a therapist, counselor, or social worker, or even your primary care doctor, your state or county mental health authority, or your health insurance company for referrals for mental or behavioral health. So mental health treatment varies by diagnoses, by struggles, and by each person's individual goal. So there's no one size fits all for treatment. And there's a lot of different treatment options, which we're happy to explore and discuss if that's something that people are interested in. But just to mention a few: medication, counseling or therapy, and social support can be very helpful. And like I started this off with, education, which you're all doing right now. Education is the first step, that awareness of the situation, acceptance of it, and then taking some action. So I'd also like to say, so we all know again that the current effects of COVID-19 pandemic, the restrictions, the economic struggles, and isolation are having profound effects on mental health, substance abuse, as Andrew mentioned, and sense of security and sense of oneself, and sense of order. So now more than ever, it's a really important time to reach out and acknowledge our human experience with others. So really, again, reaching out, connecting with people, letting them know if we're seeing or observing some concerns. Brene Brown, who's a licensed clinical social worker and a PhD in social work, says, "We don't have to do it all alone. We were never meant to." And I really appreciate that quote. Again, we don't have to do it all alone. We are never meant to, that this is a time to reach out to others, knowing that our reaching out in our own vulnerability can also help others tap into their own human experience of vulnerability. So I don't want this to seem dire. I want people to recognize there's a lot of hope in discussing this and fleshing it out. I am going to just check and see if we have anything in the chat before I go on. Let's see, we have a few things in here. Oh, thank you so much, Melissa, for chatting in. Can we address some of these changes in adapting to our new world that we find ourselves in? Absolutely. We can talk about that. So thank you for asking that question. Again, if anyone else has questions, please put them in the chat. I'm going to continue to, and actually directly to address you, Melissa's question, because it is really important how we address this. So again, like I said, education, and I truly believe reaching out to others authentically and vulnerably, and allowing ourselves to change or to challenge maybe the social norm of not talking about mental illness and asking someone, "Are you okay? I kind of seem like you seem really tired, and I want to know if you're all right." Or even sharing some of your own, like, "I've been really tired. I've been noticing that I am struggling staying up too late at night. How are you doing?" Having these authentic communications and connections. But another skill that I'm hoping that I'm not hoping, we will get into, is practicing some of this self-care. So again, if you have any thoughts you'd like to share with us, please do place them in the chat. But I want to read too a quote from one of my favorite researchers. He's an esteemed epidemiologist, Dr. Sandro Gallia, I apologize. And he has studied the effects of 9/11 and now the current global COVID-19 pandemic on physical and mental health. He is a doctor, and he states that there are many protective factors that can keep people from suffering from long-term trauma. But one such factor, which can be sought and provided by anyone, may also help those whose mental health problems persist: social support. Social support is probably the single most clear driver that mitigates the consequences of trauma. Dr. Gallia says it's central. So I think too, that's another important recognition we have to make right now, that there's significant evidence that social support, mutual aid, is a clear driver that mitigates consequences of trauma. And I think it's undeniable to state that COVID-19 has been very traumatic for us as a culture, and especially in the fact that it has affected everyone across the world. So finding that social support and that connection with others is deeply important at this time. So how do we provide social support? As I said, reaching out authentically, vulnerably, but also really recognizing that our ability to care for others deeply comes from our own ability to care for ourselves. So self-care, which is kind of a buzzword that everyone's probably heard, and it's sort of like, yeah, we all know what we should be doing. We should probably be eating, eating in a certain way, or moving more and sleeping more. But how do we do that? How do we do that when there's so much going on, especially as those of you that are small business owners or business providers, caring for not only your own family during a global pandemic, but your colleagues and the people that you manage and support? That's an incredible amount of pressure. So, although it may sound cliche, the self-care is extremely important. So I'm hoping, inviting you all to participate in an element of self-care today, to do some breath work with us. It'll be very brief. Your camera is off and none of us can see you. So I invite you just to come into this experience with us. So, and I see we also have another great question too. Can you define and speak to evidence-based treatments being offered, please? And we can absolutely do that at the close of our session. We can talk a lot about evidence-based, which I appreciate that you use that terminology for evidence-based treatments, which means there's significant peer-reviewed research behind the treatment modalities. So one of those treatment modalities that we're using is actually breath work, which we'll be doing a brief guided piece right now. So I invite you all to participate. So if you can maybe shut down some emails, if you do have some other emails going on, shut down your cell phone to participate more fully, that would be fantastic. And I invite you to come into a more intentional seated position. So if you're in a chair, allowing your feet to ground down into the floor. So you're pressing them flat into the floor. Really taking a moment to feel that. The sensation and the pressure and the points of your feet that are on the floor. And from there, let the entire bottom half of your body be heavy. So the backs of your legs, heavy, weighted, and grounded. So that you can find some buoyancy in the top of your chest. So maybe lift your sternum, the bony part of your chest, up towards the ceiling. Drop your shoulders and create a little more space between the bottom of your ears and your shoulders. Let your spine be long. And drop your shoulders. Bring your awareness to your forehead. Take a moment to ease any tension that may have accumulated between your eyebrows. Seeing if you can move that energy or visualize moving it up and over your eyebrows, down your temples. Releasing your bottom teeth from your top to create a heavy, relaxed jaw. And let that jaw be heavy. Let your tongue be heavy. And just bring your awareness to the cadence of your own breath today. If it helps, you might want to place one hand up at your sternum and one just above your navel, so you can actually feel the subtle rise of your chest as you inhale. And the subtle retraction as you exhale. And just pause here, feeling your own breath. Feeling the temperature of your breath as it enters your nose, as it moves through your body, as it fills your lungs. And then feeling the release of your exhale. Just holding this moment, allowing yourself to be right here, just with your breath. And now we're going to actually change our breath pattern. So on the inhale, I'd like you to try to inhale for a count of 4. So inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding the breath. And then exhaling for a count of 4. And trying again, inhaling for a count of 4. 3, 4. Holding the breath. And exhaling for a count of 4. And just try 2 more cycles on your own of inhaling for a count of 4. Briefly holding the breath. And exhaling for a count of 4. Now you can bring your breath back to your own natural cadence. Just noticing where your breath is today, noticing your body that you inhabit right now, exactly as it is. And as you breathe normally, peacefully, I want you to really focus on the extension of your lungs, creating a little more space, a little more capacity to breathe a little deeper today. When I mean focus on the capacity, I mean breathe so deep that your back ribs extend, your side ribs extend, that you breathe into the spaces that we normally protect with our arms, by our armpits. Breathe so deep that your entire rib cage expands so you take up more space and more room. When we hold space for ourselves to pause, feel our own breath, and feel whatever emotion arises underneath any anxiety, fear, or discomfort, we can create a natural space for unfolding, for transformation. And not just for ourselves, but for our community and our society at large. We all have an impact. Our individual well-being and our self-care has an impact on others. So now in closing, take a moment to thank your body. Thank your lungs for continuing to receive breath. Your heart for continuing to beat. All the while without you ever telling it to do so. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the temperature of the air on your skin. Bring your awareness to any other noises in the space you're inhabiting now. Maybe people in the next room, sounds from the street, whatever's in your space. And if your eyes are closed, slowly and gently open them from top to bottom. And collective exhale. So thank you if you participated in that with me. I should have probably led with this, but I want to say it's extremely important in the virtual world to take a pause, even if you take less than a minute to do some conscious breathing between your virtual activities. Many of us are not commuting anymore and there's no segue. So creating that pause to reconnect back into the body you inhabit before you go into your next event, your next meeting, childcare, whatever it is really essential to our well-being. I have some more information I can share when we gather in our talking phase about some of the benefits of what we just did, but I really wanted everyone to have an experience first, hopefully, of feeling where their body is today. So at this point, I'm wondering if we can actually pause and invite people to share if they have any thoughts, questions about that experience before we move on. I don't know if speakers are able to unmute or if they can just use the chat function.
They will have to be just using the chat function.
Thank you, Elliot. Well, if we don't have any, okay. Oh, any advice to help kids relax and de-stress? Great question, Leah. Thank you for asking. It's a really good one. I will address that. And I started using the health math system a while ago, but to make myself remember to do it. Okay, I'm not familiar with the hearth math system, Ginny, but thanks for mentioning that. Maybe you can explain or put a link into that. Kids to de-stress, that's a great question. I think one of the things that's so important is sort of to wind back and go to the night before and healthy and adequate sleep. Healthy and adequate sleep, which is really challenging, but to make sure that kids, like little adults, are getting enough adequate sleep and rest. And then encouraging kids to do somatic or body work as well. And that looks different than adults. It might not look like that breathing grounding exercise for a kid, but it might be going outside and jumping up and down, filling their lungs on their own with that excitement, or running in place. And again, when I say somatic, soma comes from our Greek of body. So have a body experience. So for a child up here in New England, we're fortunate. We can be like, okay, if a child needs to de-stress and relax, go outside and run around the house 3 times, getting their blood pumping, getting them back in their skin and feeling that rush of cold air. So I think those are some helpful ways for children. It's often a lot more about the movement to help them get that breath going and utilize that. To give you guys a little theory on this. So when we breathe deeply, like I was trying to lead us through in the end of expanding our rib cage, we're tapping into our polyvagal nerve, which is our 10th cranial nerve. And that nerve runs to our lungs, our heart, our digestive system, up into our brain. And when we expand our rib cage, that taps off that nerve to relax our parasympathetic nervous system and help calm us and calm our cortisol levels. So instead of telling ourselves, don't be anxious, don't be anxious, don't be stressed, the body tells our body, relax, calm down, slow the blood pressure, slow the pulse. So again, expanding that rib cage and doing some breathing is very helpful. So thank you. And Ginny, it looks like it's putting in some information about hearth math system to monitor. Well, that sounds really interesting. Ginny says, I bought and use this mechanism to help monitor whether I'm really relaxing or de-stressing. And there are a lot of really great apps out there actually to help people either monitor or also increase meditation and mindfulness, such as the Calm app, the Moshi app for kids, or Moshi app for kids. And there are several other ones. I don't want to endorse just one particular one that you can look up that can remind you and guide you through some meditations. Thank you for those questions. I will say too, because the topic of this conversation, I wanted to sort of gather some of my thoughts to more suggestions too, besides that experience we had of breath work. But again, for our colleagues and for our communities and businesses, recognize the signals of stress, as we talked about in the beginning. So learn to not just to recognize them in others, but to pay attention to our own body's response to stress. When we feel stressed, what is our own physiological response? Do we feel our heart rate going up? Do we get hot? Do we get shaky? Do we start to sweat? Do you clench your jaw? So recognize those symptoms so you can have some awareness that your body is going into stress so you can breathe and manage it. The great thing about breath work is you don't need a prescription to do it. You don't need a doctor's permission. You can do it at any time.
Jana,
Okay.
I unmuted Ginny if she wants to add something about the heart math.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Jenny.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I came across this because a friend of mine told me years ago, maybe 10 or more years ago, came across the system as a teacher in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She worked with the special ed kids, and her task was basically special ed, and I guess more behavior problem type kids in the high school level. And her task was to help them basically graduate from high school. They weren't graduating. And she went to this institute when she learned about it to learn how to teach it, and started achieving really great results teaching kids how to use this. And I don't know what kind of marketing mechanism was going on at the time, but she told me they had this device. And I was having trouble learning to meditate, so she said, why don't you try it? And it's kind of cool. She achieved enough success that the school district started sending her all around Dallas-Fort Worth area to teach it to other schools. So maybe because I'm more of a visual person, it helps. You attach this little mechanism to your ear, and you put an app on your phone, and it's measuring, I don't know what it's measuring, your heart rate, and maybe your breathing, and it gives you some audible cues. And I just found it was helping me concentrate more. My struggles, concentrate on relaxing more. My struggles learning to meditate, I felt like I had, I guess, what some people out there call monkey brain. I couldn't get my brain to calm down. I don't have ADD or anything diagnostic like that. I'm just sort of a type A person, run two businesses. And it's just hard to separate myself from all of that and take a few minutes out of a day and make this, respite for myself. So I felt like this helped me, and it gives me a visual representation afterwards of sort of what I've achieved and what I can go for. So if you want me to say anything else, I'll try, but that's how I came across it. A friend of mine introduced me to it after teaching it and achieving success with high school kids.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll get back to Jana now.
Okay.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, I really appreciate hearing about that. Finding what works is so important. And that's pretty exciting that it worked with adolescents, because adolescents, it can be a bit more challenging, I think, to deliver some of this information to. So that's really encouraging. James also mentions visual cues to stress manage are awesome. So I think that's, again, what works for you. And what you can access through the day is really important to tap back into that body awareness, because what's really incredible about this is that our body's giving us messages all day long throughout the day of how we're doing. And sometimes we can't think ourselves out of our own anxiety or stress, that not enough thinking and solution and problem solving can get us out of those feelings of hyperarousal. So finding, first having the awareness of knowing I'm in a hyperarousal state. How do I calm this down? How do I tamper this? And what's effective for me? It's really important. I will continue with what I was sharing again of just some of the tips for working professionals and communities. So recognizing the signal of stress, creating a ritual of taking stress breaks. If this works for you, maybe get up from your desk after every Zoom or meeting and just walk around to get some fresh air and movement back in the body, or taking that pause again if you don't even have time to walk, for some deep breathing, shoulder shrugs, or even just closing your eyes for a minute to break from this technology. These mini breaks are really essential to our mental health, an important strategy for dealing with the day-to-day cumulative stress that we're all managing. This is a challenging one for many of us, but create work boundaries. Find an effective way to set boundaries between your work life and your home life. So whether that's, again, if you're just going into the next room to do childcare after being on your virtual meetings all day, find a way to create that boundary of transitioning from your work persona to your personal persona. So, and that also, hopefully, people are still keeping up with hobbies or activities that they love and find meaningful besides work and family. I know it's a little challenging during this time of COVID restrictions. And then we all know exercising regularly, for whatever that looks like, that exercise is essential for our mental health. We can help with our exercise dissipate some of the stress hormones that are created in our body. So we can actually help manage some of the cortisol that may arise from stressful interactions throughout the day by exercising. It's one way that's highly effective to do this. And also, it obviously helps us with body awareness, coordination, and many things that also then will help with brain health. Exercise is extremely helpful for also keeping our brain healthy. Develop a support system, as I talked about before, the essential need we all have, especially now with a global crisis, to support each other. So that might be, your peers, your boss, family members, trusted friends. If you're in 12-step programs or mutual aid programs, staying connected to that support system. And this is an interesting one that I always love, of taking time to recover. Professional athletes know that they can't push themselves every single day to 100% capacity 100% of the time, or else they'll get diminished returns. So there's this beautiful relationship that we have to know with resting and recharging. It's critical to our creative thinking, our critical thinking, our relationships, and our good health, that we need time to recover from everything we're doing. And lastly, and to me almost and most importantly, reconnect with your values. Make conscious choices that support your core values with what matters to you in your life. Life balance is very complex and challenging. So really taking time to reconnect with what matters most to you and making sure that you're living in service of those values. So thank you. For now, I'd love to turn it over to Andrew to talk more about this, and also encourage people again to write in some questions or thoughts they may have of anything we've shared today.
Thank you, Jana. I'm just going to stop sharing the PowerPoint for a moment. I'm going to, so in my role, I'm a manager of a team of therapists and other professionals that are helping people with substance abuse and mental health struggles. So a big part of what I think, what I'm talking about here is how can we support our staff, our leaders, to help them stay engaged and motivated in what has been really a long, hard time for a lot of people. So I just wanted to share just a few tips of things that we've implemented, I think, that have been helpful to our staff. Depending on what type of business you're running, you may have people that are completely remote, managing teams of people who are completely remote and isolated from one another, or you may have people who have been this whole time working in an office and dealing with the day-to-day worries of, am I going to get sick, and how do I stay safe? So for those businesses who are have people that are there in person, hopefully having very clear guidelines for safety, wearing masks, wearing protective gear, and being a role model in maintaining those standards, I think is helpful to show your staff that you care about their safety and that it's of the utmost priority. And I think for those who have teams who are all virtual and are used to seeing their colleagues and even customers in person, I think this can be very isolating. So one of the things that's been helpful, I think, that we recommend is having regular team meetings within your team. This could maybe at minimum once a week, if not once a day, and having part of those team meetings not just be about business, but just 5 minutes of human interaction. How are you doing? What's going on for you? I try to integrate humor in there because we all need a laugh these days. So having that, and then having time each week with each staff to check in with them individually to really get a sense of where they are and what their struggles are, what's going on for them. I think this has been helpful in identifying also kind of the next point is taking time off. There weren't a lot of places to go travel this year. So I think saw a lot of staff who didn't take time off and were working really hard throughout this pandemic. And just encouraging people to take that time when you notice that they're getting mentally and physically exhausted. Because I think what we're seeing in everyone is fatigue from, all the scenarios that you need to run through to be safe and to keep your family safe, yourself safe, your employees safe. So those are just a few suggestions for how to support one another. And as vaccines are becoming available, and hopefully there's an end to this in sight, where things can, things in terms of our businesses are going to change in the near future. And for some, they may not. Some people may remain remote for a period of time. So I think we're going to see a lot of change in the next few months. So just being willing to talk about with your staff what those changes are like and what people are going through. With that, I think I'm going to pause, and we wanted to open it up for sort of a panel discussion and for more questions. Yes, and I see from James, fatigue, yes, and fear. I think fear, there's a lot of fear, both about this pandemic, about job security, about social and political unrest. There's just so much that we're all holding, in this space.
Or multitasking as we do this, presenting and reading the chat. So I love this. What about multitasking? Is it really unhealthy? Seems to be my way of business. Jenny, I love this question. I can't help saying that there's an extraordinary article written actually by another practitioner at Mountainside, Tuan, on multitasking. And it's pretty extraordinary. And he sort of shares how some of the antidote I see, or the relief to the healing of the multitasking that many of us are doing, is meditation and mindfulness and coming back to retraining our brain. Tuan says, that meditation is one of the only things he gets back twofold from the time he invests in it. So while it may feel very natural and we may get a high from multitasking and doing many things at once, there is some research that we actually don't do them as effectively as when we do separate them. And I know that's difficult to do, and I think we shouldn't judge it. But I love what Jenny, thank you again, says. I totally agree. My mind has been retrained to multitask. So the great thing about the brain and the mind is neuroplasticity, that we can retrain our brain. So many of us are really multitasking with this format of working. So retraining our brain when we have those moments. And again, that's why I try to encourage people to find brief moments that they can incorporate into our lives. So those brief pauses where you're just doing one thing. So if that one thing is focusing on your breath, or if that one thing is focusing on the email or reading to your child, being with that one small thing for that short, however long amount of time you have to be with that. Because multitasking leads to a few different things that I can say off the top of my head. It leads to exhaustion often because the brain is doing sort of mental gymnastics. It leads to often not as effective, strong work when we're doing something, we're also doing something else. So our work may be harmed in it. And I think, again, the physical exhaustion of doing many things at once. So we can retrain our brain to do one thing at a time, but it is like training a puppy, or as you mentioned, the monkey mind. I think we had a few more comments too. Focusing on my coffee is a nice little escape. I so agree, James. That's a great one. Rose says, any ideas for getting people remotivated to moving again? So much weight gain and muscle loss due to COVID. Yeah, so I think one thing we know from addictions that I like to remind people is, sometimes I'll ask people, does it ever help if you whine or nag someone to stop using or doing that? Usually the answer is no. And when I ask the person that's being whined at or nagged on, does it help you when they nag you or tell you or lecture you? And usually the answer is no. So I don't believe that nagging or lecturing increases intrinsic motivation. What I do believe in is often that when we focus on ourselves and healing ourselves in general, there's a ripple effect that often touches the people around us. So when we focus on our self-care, our well-being, our health, it can often attract others to work on their behavioral health or their physical health challenges. If someone does respond well to good information, there's tons of interesting psychoeducation on the benefits of movement. So even just if that does help someone to know how much they're helping their body through movement, you can provide some education in that perspective. But that's what I've found effective. I'm curious, I don't know, Andrew, if you have any other thoughts on either of those questions, because I think they're good ones.
I think they are good. Just a brief about kind of getting moving. One thing I'm thinking of that we've done as a sort of a team building exercise was we had a planking challenge that we would do every November as a team, where we would all get together, anybody that wanted to participate in it, and it would sort of, we would all plank together. And I guess you could do that from home virtually as well. But just taking time to do something together to kind of set a common goal that you're working towards. But I think, as Jana said, I think a lot of it is just modeling. I think we had to kind of reconfigure our routines, through this, and just, I think, making exercise, other forms of well-being part of your routine, and a scheduled part of your routine is very helpful there. I see a question from Dan there. Do you think paying attention when we're triggered is important? And how does subconscious existing issues play into our current reaction to events? I think that kind of goes into the question about multitasking there. Just that we do need to pay attention to what we're experiencing. Often we're going through our workday and multitasking and doing 15 things at once. And what's happening for us in our bodies? Can we feel that we're tense, that our neck's tight? And I think, yeah, Jana, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate what you just said, Andrew. It made me think, especially with world events, before our towns, our cities, our states, and our countries, we live in our body first. So like you said, that awareness of like, I'm feeling triggered, or my jaw is tense, or I've been watching the news for this many hours and it's making me feel riled up. So just being aware and having boundaries. So I'm not suggesting anyone bury their head in the sand, but being really aware of how this information is affecting me and possibly triggering me to other times in my life where I didn't have control. When we talk about past traumas, times in our lives when we didn't have control, agency, or ability to use our voice, or whatever may be coming up with what we're seeing. Um, and I really love too, again, someone just put something about hormones and menopausal hormones and cause of anxiety and lack of concentration. Absolutely. And we are seeing this especially with women. As women age, women metabolize alcohol differently. And it's really important to know how much our hormones affect our body. So yes, with anxiety, sleep disturbances, hot flashes, all sorts of somatic experiences, and just our metabolism shifting as women age, that absolutely has to do with our physical and our mental health. So very important to address. And the movement certainly helps with balancing those hormones. And there are various other things that help too. I am aware of the time, and I'm realizing when we briefly did our introductions, Wendy normally gives a beautiful, more fleshed out introduction, but I did want to say, we have groups at Mountainside, even in exercise, a free virtual exercise group that some of us as staff get on, it's open to staff, the public, clients, former clients, alumni, at 8:30 in the morning, and it's on our website, our virtual group, but we have a lot of other mutual aid support groups, and I wanted to mention that there are a lot of free supports out there, so that people know that on our Mountainside, our Mountainside website, we do have some of those things we talked about today, as far as free mutual aid support groups for those that are struggling with various things and different community events for exercise, well-being, free meditation at night. So a lot of good stuff.
Good. So is that the end of your presentation?
Unless anyone else has any more questions.
Let's see.
I'm going to thank you. And again, I'm so sorry that anyone that for our delayed start. We're really excited to be here, and we're really grateful to Tim Ryan and to you, Elliot, for graciously hosting us today and getting us started and helping us with our technical difficulties.
Well, thanks to both you and to Andrew for joining and sharing your insights and knowledge with the business people who come to our webinar. Just a little something at the end about our Fairfield County score. We have over 130 volunteers with a wide variety of experience and expertise. So anything that you may need some help with, we're there. There are 3 primary services. There's one-on-one business mentoring, which is now happening remotely, and also business education programs like these webinars. We in times when we can get together, we have live workshops right now. All of our presentations are in the form of a webinar that's over Zoom. And our next one is actually tomorrow at noontime. Again, selling skills for non-salespeople, quite different from today's presentation, but maybe of interest to some of you. So if you are interested, you can see at the bottom, go to fairfieldcounty.score.org, and you can find out about that and other webinars and register for those. We also have extensive sources up on YouTube. We have past webinars that can be referenced, and we invite you all to return to another webinar or explore our videos and join us another time. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
So,
thank you, Elliot. Will this be up on YouTube, or will we have access to this?
This will be up on YouTube in about 2 days, and people can watch it again.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing and end the program. Thank you all.